go ahead and get started and just let those who sign in join us as we're getting into it. Um, Again, this is the Grad School 101 kind of session virtually. I'm really hoping that a lot of the learning comes from our Q&A session. We are kind of waiting on one more admissions rep to join us, but I will just go ahead and introduce myself. So I'm Amanda Moore. I'm a career coach at Vanderbilt. I also have my master's in social work. So I've navigated this process of going through the grad school application, the search, the interview, all that kind of fun stuff. I'm also one of the career coaches that sits on the grad school committee because we have recently taken on grad school advising, knowing that a lot of our students do go on in the future to get a master's degree. We wanted to holistically support where our students were headed in the future. So know that we do have coaches. All of our coaches can help you navigate your search, finding your fit, preparing your materials, all of that fun stuff. And I actually even have a day out of my week completely devoted to those conversations. After I go through kind of the getting started, these are the 3 representatives that hopefully will have everyone be able to join us today. And they're just going to kind of answer some of your questions that getting started. Okay, so we're going to really just go through the nuts and bolts really quickly. And like I said, then I'm going to facilitate a Q&A between the panelists who are able to join us. So the first part of getting started is the preparation, right? So have you thought about what kind of experience, how are you going to market yourself when it comes to applying to grad school? That could include summer experiences, things you're doing on campus. Sometimes graduate programs have an emphasis on experience in research. Some have, a really big heart for volunteer experience or leadership. So how are you going to speak to your key accomplishments? But then there's GPA requirements. These are kind of like the jargon pieces when it comes to each individual program. Like, have you thought about essays? And I didn't write personal statement or statement of purpose or both because a lot of different programs use different terminology based on what they're trying to learn about their candidates, right? So these are all the different layers of preparation. Have you thought about your recommenders? Who's going to best be able to speak to your ability to navigate a program successfully, or what you've done in your experience and how you're going to apply this degree in the future? So have you already started thinking about your people? If you're looking at applying directly out of undergrad, a lot of people assume that you'll use academic people in your recommender kind of circle, but also like you could always have, someone from an internship or someone from your leadership experience. So just utilizing kind of your resources, your network, reaching out to those people beforehand so that you can bring them into that process, help them as best you can, giving them your resume beforehand so that they can speak knowledgeably about your candidacy, your resume and your CV. Like, those are things your career center could help you with, your career coach. Transcripts, really easy for a Vanderbilt student to get hold of that, which is to your benefit. There's other things like test scores. Do you know what tests your programs that you're interested in needs? Have you thought about, even in this season that we're in now, the accessibility, how to prepare, when you're going to take it, do I need to retake it? Because all of these things start to add up in the time component of getting ready, getting that application form completed. And then sometimes that application has a fee component with it. So being in contact with people who are like admission representatives who can tell you, like, are there fee waivers? How do I navigate the fee or the form? And then the application process, like the main pieces of that is being organized, staying on top of the different deadlines. Every program's a little bit different. There are some seasonal pieces with that. Planning ahead, again, getting organized. Your career coach can help you with that. I can help you with that. Whether it's you're a spreadsheet person or a notes person, just keeping all of your information together so you know who you've contacted already about your recommendations, or have you talked to a current student. Again, it's reiterating, being in touch with your recommenders early, utilizing student support services, not just the Career Center. Maybe you utilize the Writing Center as well. And then when we talk about timeline, I'm really focusing on our juniors and seniors here, but it goes from starting early, research, the funding and scholarship components. Starting early can help with that as well. Brainstorming your recommenders, asking for alumni and faculty insight. When it comes to finding which program best fits with your long-term goals, that's very individual based. It could be location, it could be concentration, it could be accessibility, it could be a specific researcher that you want to work with or a faculty member. Test scores and completion of those test scores, and talking to admissions reps. I have multiple times, just story after story, I've heard from students who've navigated the grad school process who say talking to the rep, talking to a current student has made the impact of their decision, like where the best fit for them was. And then when you come to your senior year, obtaining those letters, making sure that you're in touch with your recommenders, that they have completed, having maybe some backups, the completion of a full application. I'm sure our two panelists who are here can speak to, you know, sometimes people go through all of the stages except for like they forget one piece of their application. I saw that as someone who worked in admissions previously. So just being on top of that organization, that you complete the full application, taking advantage of on-campus visits, or maybe if they're virtual now, student like scheduling follow-up to check on your application status after you've submitted your full application, then making that selection. And we would love for you to share your decision with your career coach or with your university, to sharing kind of that partnership and sending your thank you notes. And then I know I sent a handful of y'all who RSVP'd or registered for this event, our list on our website that I kind of cultivated with some students who had navigated, you know, grad school selection, grad school interviews, and questions they wish that they had, questions they wish they had asked along that process, or things that you could just think about that might impact your decision differently. And so I emailed all of that information to y'all yesterday, but these are kind of things to consider when it comes to kind of our next Q&A portion, about maybe getting connected with faculty, or funding and costs. Like, do they have any graduate assistantships? How do I learn about those? Financial aid, when to apply for financial aid? These are very program specific, but also student life. Is it cohort based? What does the diversity look like? What is the population? Are people coming right out of school? Things that you wouldn't necessarily learn just from a website. Student support services. Do they have career centers for those graduate students? What are the career outcomes? So these are just different things to consider when it comes to having those conversations with your admissions reps. So now we're going to move into the Q&A. We are going to be using Slido, so I'm going to move out of the presentation mode here. I'm going to unmute our panelists who are here, or y'all can unmute yourselves. Blake and Brittany, if y'all want to take a second to introduce yourselves. I'll let Brittany go first.
Perfect. And let me know if you want us to go on video too.
I think I'm good with just, we're going to move to Slido so I can help. When we get to the Slido, you'll see how it's a really great moderator platform.
Cool. Hi, everyone. My name is Brittany Romance, and I'm the Director of Admissions and Recruitment for Emory University's Rollins School of Public Health. So it is quite a busy time for us right now, not just in the admissions world, but also in public health. I myself have a master's in public health. I specialized in behavioral sciences and health education. I worked in the field for about 10 years after receiving my master's degree, and worked at the federal level at the CDC, worked at the state level, local level, all forms of government, clinical field, nonprofit, was redetailed to the Ebola outbreak in 2014. So pandemics are a little bit of my background right now. I'm happy to talk about the admission process, what we're looking for. I myself am not trained in admissions, so coming from a professional setting into admissions world has been extremely enlightening. So I'm happy to give you real world examples and talk through everything with you.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Hope everyone can hear me all right, but thank you for having me, Amanda. So my name is Blake McLaren. I work at Wake Forest University School of Business. I'm an assistant director of enrollment management recruiting there, specifically for our master's in accounting, business analytics, and management programs. I myself am a graduate of Wake Forest. I graduated in 2015 with my bachelor's in psychology and went on to do the master's of management program actually in 2016. Between then and now, I've worked in Charlotte for a few years, doing some digital marketing work before landing back at Wake in the past year in this admissions role for the School of Business. So I've gone through the graduate admission process myself, and so I'm really happy to be here and talk about all this with you guys.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We're so glad to have you. So I'm going to move us into the Slido. So it's going to be a little clinky for a second. So just 1 second. Here we go. Okay, can everybody see screen share? If you have any problems, let me know. So Slido is a really great platform. So you just go to slido.com and you use hashtag grad101, or you can use this little QR code to sign in. And once you get in, you can start submitting your questions for our panelists. I can kind of start while we're getting students signed in and familiar with Slido. So the first question I would ask just both of you, Blake and Brittany, I know that you both represent different kinds of programs, but just if overall you could kind of give a little bit of a tip from your experiencing having navigated it yourself as a student, but also what you've seen as in your role as like kind of an all-star candidate. What can students do to make themselves stand out?
Sure, I can take that first. So to be a more outstanding candidate and really get yourself out there and in the eyes of the admissions and the whole process, I think, like Amanda said before, is really communicating with your admissions representatives and trying to touch every piece of the university as well. So doing your research on the university, not only the specific program you're going into, but the university as a whole. And also potentially connecting with any alumni of that university, any career services people, any of your integrative student services and academic support individuals in that program. And that's something that your admissions rep could all help you connect with. And so being close with them, I think is a really good place to start for being a candidate for any of the programs.
Awesome.
And I think bouncing off of that, I would say doing a little bit of self-discovery. When you're thinking about graduate school, you're thinking about putting an investment into yourself. It is quite expensive depending on the school you're going to. So it is that investment. So when you're thinking about it, think about 5 years down the line of what do you want to do after you receive your master's or your doctorate or what have you, and think about the population you want to work with. Think about, do you like research? Do you like doing community work? What skill sets do you have already, and what skill sets do you need to build upon? That will help you navigate into it. And then when you're getting down into it, I think the biggest piece of advice I had would be thinking about your personal statement or your interview, something that you can control. So if you are a junior or a senior, there's a good chance your grades are already done. So it's already there. Most schools look at a holistic aspect. So the time that you're able to invest in would really be on things that you can change right now, which would be more volunteering, internships, that personal statement, and talking about your journey into it. I'm happy to talk more about the personal statement later because I'm sure we'll get some questions about that.
I hope
I'll stop right
yeah. Awesome. We've got 2 that have come in. I'm hoping that y'all can see the questions. Students, I also want you to be aware that you can if you see a question that you want, as they start coming in, that you want moved to the top of the pile, just like that question. So you don't even have to necessarily, I'd love to see you all enter in a question. But yeah, if any, Blake or Brittany, if either one of you would like to address this one, I would love to learn more about applying to grad school from the workplace. How does that differ from what you look for? Great question.
Sure. So in the business school where I work, we do get quite a few people that have gone out into the workforce, have worked a few years and want to return and build upon their skills, and they have already navigated and figured out what they like and what they don't like about certain areas and industries that they work in. So it's a good opportunity to go back to school after working. I would say it only really helps you in the case of going to business school, because you have even more experiences and potentially leadership experiences to draw from and talk about in your interview, and just in any consults or anything that you are using to talk to admissions representatives, as well as just navigating team dynamics. And a lot of different universities have a lot of team-based work and team-based projects that you'll be working on in your graduate cohorts. And so having those experiences is going to really help you out. In terms of like moving away from work in terms of like financial situations, at least awake, you're still, if you're coming from work, working for a few years or directly out of undergrad, you're still going to be looked at for any merit-based and need-based scholarship opportunities as well. So.
Wonderful.
And bouncing off of that, similar to what Blake said, having work experience is only an asset to you, but flip side, for those of you who are not planning to go into the workplace, it really depends on what your background is. So for me, I went straight from undergrad into graduate school. But I had been working since I was 13, which is a little crazy to think about. But I had been a candy striper, and then I worked in an ER. I was trained as an EMT. I did some child life specialist work later on. Had done a bunch of research. So I was definitely that type A overachiever. So I went straight into it knowing exactly what I wanted to do because I had those clinical experiences. For us in public health, a lot more of our work experience either comes from those who are in the clinical field already and wish to obtain a public health degree to gain more of a societal impact in terms of the work they're doing. But we also have those who maybe have done AmeriCorps for 2 years, are returning for Peace Corps service, and those all lend itself perfectly to talking about why you're doing public health. I think joining the workplace really depends on how the economy is doing and what you need for yourself. So it's only an asset, but just be able to explain why, and especially if you're taking a gap year, that's a little bit different than going into the workforce. So I encourage you to speak with your advisor, like Amanda, if you're taking a gap year, and how you might want to craft that.
That's all really great notes. And you kind of hit on a little bit, I know we've got a bunch of questions on the docket, but you kind of hit on something a lot of students ask about, should I wait, should I work, the gap year conversation. So I really appreciate both of those perspectives. Emma's got a question. I'm interested in learning more about choosing recommenders. What do you advise taking into consideration? Great question, Emma.
Yeah, I can hop in because where Blake has had to do.
It's just a conversation there. You guys are, I'm really appreciative of just demonstrating for students that you guys are humans and you can answer questions. So thank you. Yeah.
I'm really impressed with how we're bouncing off each other right now.
I thought you planned it. Yes.
In terms of recommenders, I think the biggest thing, and Amanda already said this, when you're looking for a recommender, if you're looking for someone to speak to your academics, you want to ask someone who can speak to your potential success in a graduate school program. So yes, your professors can always say, like, this person got an A in Biology 101 or Econ 101. And that's great. That showcases that you did really well in undergrad, but what we're looking for is your success in a graduate school program. So when you're asking a recommender, you want to specifically say, can you speak to my success in a graduate school program? And recommenders will be very upfront with you and say yes or no. When you're looking for someone in that community aspect, which is a lot in medical schools and public health schools, social work, things of that nature. You're looking for someone to balance that academic success. So are you a good team player? Are you able to jump in? What are your vulnerabilities? Things like that. So you're looking for that like grit. So you have the academics and then the grit, and are you a team player? So you want to balance it. Think about it as a collective. So we read all of the references back to back. So we want to see this well-rounded picture of you. If someone's saying the same thing, like they're great, they're great, they're great, that's great, but I want to know why you're great. And just remember that we're reading a bunch of them. So sometimes, like, I've cried when I read references. I'm definitely that person. So someone can make you a person to us. It's really wonderful. So you just want to be a person.
Yeah, exactly. And really bouncing off that, you want someone who knows you well, who has either worked with you or seen you in some kind of team or leadership situation, someone who can speak to your work ethic and your resilience in managing either difficult situations or challenging tasks. I think all of those, and exactly what Brittany said as well, go into choosing a good recommender.
I love that you just use it's my social work heart, I'm sure, but I love that you use the word resilience, because especially in this season that we're all navigating, I have seen just the students overwhelmingly demonstrate their resiliency. So this obviously could play a part in that story. So I appreciate that perspective.
And I'll say this too, just to put it into perspective, all y'all have already asked people for references to get into undergrad, and you did a good job because you got in. So you're good at it. Like, don't forget that you've already gone through this admissions process before. It's not very different. It's just a different time of life for you.
That's a really great positive perspective. We love that. The next question on the list is, what are career options post grad school? What's the best way to find out how career outcomes vary from school to school? And I know you both represent just so many different options with your programs, but maybe you could speak to how they could navigate finding what your students end up doing post grad.
So I think a good place to start with any graduate school is to ask to speak with alumni, and then also looking at career center for the graduate school. And graduate school should be able to give you not a printout document displaying where the students who recently graduated have gone. We've been doing it for years. So you can simply ask admissions counselors, alumni, or career officers for that document, especially since exactly what Amanda said, Blake and I have programs that are very expansive. So you can do a lot with them. So you can just ask to see. I think when you look into it, when you talk to alums sometimes, especially when we're trying to show you the best of the school, it's like, look at this person who's the director of the CDC. That, but you're like, I want to know what's going to happen when I graduate. Like, what are my first 2 years going to look like? So look for that data. For myself, I always use myself as an example of what public health can do for you. So for me, I a double major in biochemistry and human services, and I had a pre-med concentration. All of my work was in clinical work, and then I went into my master's of public health, behavioral sciences, health education. I never knew if I wanted to keep with the research or go into the counseling, so I wanted to do the best of both worlds. I trained up in epidemiology as well, so I could maintain that. When I graduated, I went and worked for the state, and that's when the Affordable Care Act was being introduced. So what I did was created models for if states were expanding or not, budget allocations. I did strategic planning for the state of Georgia for asthma and cancer control. Was a lead analyst for Centers for Medicaid or Medicare Services. I worked for the CDC on the Ebola crisis, as well as working with some of their local public health officials and local constituents and legislators. And ran a legislative health policy certificate program. Really missed people, so I ended up going back to Rollins and I became a crisis manager. I was the director of student engagement for 3 years, and I ran the behavioral intervention team and was on call for 24/7 and responded 3 weeks out of each semester to any emergency for the entire university campus, not just for the School of Public Health, but I was the direct case manager for the School of Public Health. So Amanda, 1,200 people was really fun. And when I finished up that, I went into admissions because I really wanted to do more of a train the trainer. If you would have asked me years ago when I was getting my master's if I would be the director of admissions back at the school I graduated from, I would have laughed at you. But here I am, and it's all because—
Very impressive.
So, I mean, it's just, you kind of figure it out and be open to it. So don't like Google business degree and see like the top 3 results. Like ask alumni, ask people exactly what you're doing now.
I love that advice, especially as a social worker, now career coach, but also just the exploration, the encouraging, taking advantage of opportunities and just seeing what happens. I love that. Do you have anything to add, Blake?
Yeah, I'm just kind of bouncing off what Brittany said. I mean, every school is going to have some type of career coaching, office of personal development and career readiness. So utilizing those resources and looking at where students have gone post-graduation is important, just for a kind of baseline of what you're looking at. But then again, talking to alumni is a huge piece. And I think talking with current students as well, if again, your admissions reps can get you in contact with any of their current student ambassadors and talking about how their career search is going while in the program and how they're balancing that and what career outcomes look like for them.
Wonderful. And if you guys have specific questions for one of the panelists, just put @ in their name. So I make sure if we don't get all of them, I might reach out to Blake or Brittany to see if they can give me a quick, or I'll address them, of course. Someone that got a lot of likes, I guess a lot of these are getting likes, and it's handling that personal statement piece. So what makes a personal statement outstanding, obviously, as compared to not outstanding?
I can take this because it's my favorite topic. So the personal statement seems terrifying to everyone. It was terrifying to me when I was writing it. All I could think was, how do I make myself stand out? How do I make myself shine among all these other applicants? And then you start getting really in your head, and then you start getting imposter syndrome, and then you have no idea what you're writing about anymore.
Absolutely.
So what I say is take a breath and talk about your journey. For me right now, I'll talk about the journey into public health, because that's my background and what I'm representing. Why are you thinking about going to get your degree in public health or any master's program? How did you get there? Talk about your journey. What was that moment that you're like, oh, I don't know? And sometimes you're like, I didn't have that moment. But if you sit and jot down everything that's happened to you, the things that you like, the things that you don't like, the things that you're drawn to, those leadership moments, maybe you were a caregiver to an ailing family member, and that really sparked something for you. What is your journey? What is that class? What got you to this point? By doing that, you're talking about your own lived experience. And by talking about your own lived experience, you're the only one who's had that. So you're already setting yourself apart without even thinking about setting yourself apart, because you're your own person with the own lived experience. So really don't worry about it. Be authentic, be vulnerable, think about why you got here. That's what we want to see. We want to see a human. When it gets to the component of talking about the schools, I know Blake mentioned this, really know the language of the school that you're applying to. Check out the website, talks to people. A key example I have is that we have the Department of Behavioral Sciences and Health Education. There's one of our other peer institutes that has a community health program. If you write to me, I want to go to Emory University Rowan School of Public Health because I really want to specialize in the community health program, I already know that you are applying to the other school and you didn't do the research to just tell me what my own department is. If you're listing faculty, that's great, but give me a little bit more. Why do you want to work with that faculty member? What's a specific research? Because anyone can go on the website and type Michael Kramer or Hannah Cooper, and I'm like, cool, like you Googled a little bit, that's great. But tell me why you want to come to this school, and what kind of community is it going to make for you? Because think about the program that you're going to. You're going to spend maybe 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, depending on the program, in the community. So how are you going to affect that community, not just the school, but the surrounding area, like Atlanta for us? And just think about that and then whittle it down, because there's always a page limit. So just talk about your own journey and then do your research on the school.
Awesome. Anything to add, Blake?
That was a pretty fantastic
Yeah,
answer.
pretty fantastic. I
And
agree, it's a
especially
little
like
scary.
describing it as a journey, I think is super important, and understanding it's unique to you, I think is super important. And I know in the programs that I do enrollment for, we don't have personal statements that you have to write, but we do have series of essay questions, and we have stuff that's fun, like what makes you happy, and like describing someone, a leader you respect or admire, and what they mean to you, and how it influences you and how you lead. So really coming up with stories that you can tell to share with the admissions, and understanding you as a whole person.
Fantastic. We'll just keep chugging along. So for students who are eyeing a grad degree not directly related to their undergraduate degree, how would you recommend making that switch?
Yeah, I can take that one, since I did that specifically. So yeah, I was a psychology major, and very highly involved in psych research and everything at Wake, and thought very much I would go get a PhD in psychology, or at the very least organizational behavior or something. So I ended up going to a master's in management degree in a business school. I had never taken a business course in my life. I've never seen accounting or finance or any of that before. So for me, it's a very new experience. And I know for our management program specifically, we actually do not allow business majors to apply to the program. So everyone coming into that is coming into a new situation with getting a grad degree that's not really directly related to their undergrad degree. So I think one of the best things to do is just have an open mind and be ready to learn new things, and also think about ways that you can integrate some of what you learned in undergrad and apply it to whatever you're learning in grad school. Just because you're going through a different type of program doesn't mean you have to forget everything you learned in undergrad and leave that all behind. It's all super important to know that, and being able to mold it and add on things you learned in grad school is going to be super important. So yeah.
Wonderful.
And I agree completely. I don't have anything to add.
Great. We do have a lot of questions, so that's awesome. Is it true that grad school graduates tend to find jobs at the locations of their grad schools? Does picking a grad school mean you'll likely live in that area?
I'm happy to take this one because I always think it's a really interesting question. So when you're thinking about where everyone is going post-graduation for a graduate school program, actually start thinking about the time of life that people are in graduate school. It's not so much the location of the jobs, it's actually where people are in the point of their life. So at that time in graduate school, you could have been looking for a partner, you could have moved with a partner, you could be thinking about family planning, things of that nature. For me, I never thought I would stay in Atlanta. I moved 18 times before going to undergrad, and I'm not from the States, so I thought I would go back to either Europe or back to Canada. And for me, it just fit right. It was just where I wanted to go and stay. And the journey for me was staying as opposed to picking up and leaving again. And again, that was more to do with the time in my life as opposed to job opportunities. Because I had opportunities, one in Europe, one in DC, one in Boston, and then one in Atlanta. So for me, it was just the time of life. But you will see more people tend to stay where they are because that's just where they are in the time of life. And I don't know, Blake, if you have anything to add about that or a counterpoint to that.
No, that sounds like spot on, honestly.
Yeah.
It's really about that time in your life. And a lot of times you're choosing the grad school a lot of times in a location that you want to be in anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So you're tending to get a job in that area because you already wanted to be in that location. So I know that's true for a lot of people that come to Wake, and a lot of the southern schools as well, just being in like the warm climate and everything. They knew they wanted to be down there somewhere, and most of them tend to stay around like the southeast, for example.
And I would say too, if you're going to get your master's and you have the intention to go on to do global work, you're going to keep doing that. Your mind won't change. Your concentration might change a little bit, your research might change, but if you're going in to get the skill set to go do global work, you're still going to go do global work. You're not going to be pigeonholed in where you got your graduate degree from.
Wonderful. I think we kind of addressed this, but if y'all have anything to add about the encouraging or discouraging or kind of your perspective about the gap year experience before applying to grad school, anything to add?
I think right now is just a really interesting time, and everyone in the admissions world has, I should hope, has grace and understanding because we don't know what's happening right now. So people might be forced into taking a gap year because a lot of places have hiring freezes. Maybe you didn't expect that you were going to go to graduate school right now because there's a global pandemic going on. So right now is a really interesting time. But I would say if you're taking a gap year, just make sure that you're articulating why you're taking a gap year and framing it in a way that's that will work well for your application. Like, I don't want to read in your personal statement, like, oh, I went to Ibiza to go party because I never had been to Ibiza before. Like, cool, how is that going to help you with public health? Just be self-aware of what you're putting out there.
I agree. I think whenever a student mentions gap year, I always say, instead of calling it gap year, let's talk about what do you hope to get at the end of a year? Like, what skill would you add, or mindset, or new way of looking at things? So that's really good advice.
Yes. And I think the thing is too, I think the thing is too that y'all as students, I don't know why, but I feel like you think the admissions counselors were tracking you. You don't have to tell me. It's not a confessional if you're taking a gap year. You can still write a personal statement just as you would if you were coming straight from undergrad, things like that. The only question might come about if there's a gap on your resume of what you're doing, but it's not confession time to me. You don't have to tell me everything that you did in your gap year. I'm fine. Like, you're good.
Yes. Great advice. I always tell students, you are the owner of your information and how you craft your story. So take that to heart, everybody. Great. Another question is about PhD programs. So is it common to go straight to PhD program after undergrad? I don't know if either one of you have insight on that perspective.
For public health specifically, and more of the clinical field, it is not common unless you are a non-traditional student in undergrad, which I hate that, but you'll understand what the definition is. So most PhD programs, or doctoral programs rather, ask for work experience. So you need to be able to display that, at least in the clinical field that I know of. There are some instances where there are no master programs for the specific degree you're searching for, maybe like pharmaceutical toxicology. So you would be able to go straight into the PhD program without a master's degree, but you still might be required to work for a year.
Yeah, I think this really depends on your area of interest. I know in business it's not very typical to go get a PhD. You typically get a master's degree and maybe eventually an MBA as well, which also requires some work experience. So for at least business, I know it's not very typical.
Awesome. So now we've got, what's the biggest piece of advice you can give to someone preparing to apply for grad school?
So I think Brittany touched on this a little bit before, is really kind of taking a look at yourself and where you think you want to be, a few years down the line, and what really interests you now, and what you feel like you're going to be interested in, and what kind of skills you're hoping to gain, and then kind of going from there and navigating what types of careers are interesting to you and you feel like you'd be good at, and what type of skills you're hoping to gain to excel in whichever career you're thinking about. So I think a little just self-reflective period before, really diving into any applications is necessary. And also, talking with current students in any grad programs you're looking into, or any, again, admissions reps, and kind of aligning, is this program aligning with your goals? And if it's not, then that's okay. It's not the right program for you, and you can see another program as well.
Wonderful.
I think too, just bouncing off of that, I think in the States, it just seems very linear that the majority of students that are attending undergrad institutions right now, it may have been expected of them from their families, or just what they put on themselves, that would be the next step in their journey. And getting a master's degree is not so linear. So being very purposeful about that journey and that next step that you're taking, because again, it is an investment of time, of money, and you want to know that this is something that you want to at least pursue for a little bit of time, so you get a return on that investment.
Yeah. And then I know we've kind of exhausted the conversation around, you've given really great advice as far as rec letters. Now, if someone's coming, into the application process, maybe with a little bit more experience, I wouldn't necessarily say just a gap year, but a couple of years experience, is there a different perspective on, obviously, the commonality of who can speak to your success in the program, the diversity of your rec letters, but when it comes to, like, if there's 2 or 3, is there like a magic number of people who are professional versus academic if you've been out in the workforce for a little while?
So I think it really depends. The schools that you're applying to will pretty much say outright what you need. So like for us, we'll require 2 letters of recommendation. We'll read up to 3 letters of recommendation. If you've been out of school, we do not require one of your letters to be of a professor, because if you're 5 years out, might not want to go back. It's always good to have a balance of someone that can speak to your academic potential and someone to speak to your like professional potential to be successful in the path that you're choosing. I think that's a great question. I've actually never had that question before on when to ask if you're going to take a gap year. For me, if I had a student do that, I would like to know beforehand and then just keep in contact with the student. I wouldn't write the letter before the gap year is done, but I would say yes, I'm happy to write the letter if am comfortable doing that, and then continue the conversation to make sure that the letter I'm writing is the most up-to-date version of it.
Awesome. I actually have 2 questions, and students, if we have a couple of more minutes, so if y'all want to continue to submit some questions, we do have time to get to a few more. One of mine is, what do y'all think is like the key component? What's like the magic thing? I'm sure there's more than one, but from your perspectives, having worked with students, but also having navigated this yourself, the key component to finding fit.
I think doing your research. For me, when I was going into public health, it wasn't common. I had no idea what public health was before I was even applying to it. Like I mentioned, I wanted to be a pediatric oncologist. I applied to medical school. I got into medical school, but I was working on an HIV study and had been talking to my principal investigator how much I liked that I would be making a societal impact. And she was like, did you public health? And my mind was kind of blown. And then when I looked back on it and compared what public health was to my experiences, I was like, oh, I really am actually interested in that. So instead of accepting my medical school admission, I went into public health to pursue it. Because at that time I really wanted that societal perspective and impact. And getting my degree and working in the field, it was the best choice for me. It really solidified it. I think just finding a right fit is just one, finding the right fit of going to graduate school is just looking at your own journey and seeing if that's right for you. Finding the right school to go to, just understanding that you'll be getting a fabulous education wherever you're going. Just look at the vibe of the school. There are different components in graduate school and different things that schools focus on. They might be more research-based versus practical-based, meaning you're going to be learning to do a lot of research as opposed to maybe doing more practicums, more hands-on learning. The vibe of the school might be very different. I was talking to current students to get the reality of what they're learning and seeing what kind of work study components there are, and looking at the financial aspect of it, really being realistic about it. You should know what your finances are going to be without banking on scholarship. I think a scholarship's great, but you need to figure that out a little bit before, so it's not sticker shock. Like, don't avoid the financial aspect of it. For me, I took out loans to the cost of attendance, and I'm in the public service loan forgiveness program right now. One more year to go.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
I love the multifaceted piece of your answer, because you said research, which is very true, but you tied in talking to maybe your faculty or a mentor, because you don't know what you don't know. And they introduced you to this whole other field. And then talking to current students, the vibe piece, which can be addressed in a lot of different ways. For me, it was stepping foot on campus and getting into this school of social work and being like, these are my people. So I love the that research really could address a lot of different things. So I really, really appreciate that.
I think more than ever, just asking the questions that you want to ask. Don't be afraid. I'm not going to dock your resume or put a note in that you asked a question. Like, it's understandable.
You'd be surprised. people think that's reality, which is why this session and session like this is so important, because in the undergraduate process, they do kind of keep track of some of those things. So it's a totally different animal. So I do appreciate you saying, like, we're human, we're here to answer questions. I love that.
Even though you're staring at a Slido screen, we are human. I have dogs and cats all around me.
We're all living this virtual world.
Yes.
But the laughing, the humanity of your answers, the vulnerability, I have appreciated that. Blake, do you have any kind of secret sauce finding your fit?
Yeah, like Brittany said, I love talking about the vibe, and you can get that pretty quickly from a lot of schools and the different people you're interacting with at the university, whether that be an admissions professional, one of the current students, an alum. They can all kind of speak to how, what the vibe is at the school. But I think, Amanda, your point of going to the campus, if you possibly can, and really visualizing yourself there or not, I think is really important. And seeing the type of people and the interactions between all the different students and the faculty and staff, and how everyone is getting along while you're
Yeah,
there is also really important.
that's so great. Yeah. We actually have another student question. Is there any emphasis on demonstrated interest in the grad school application process? So I think that's kind of probably speaking to what Brittany was speaking to, thinking that students might think that you're keeping track of kind of that demonstrated interest, like who being known by your admissions people maybe.
I'd
And
say,
whoever wrote this, if you have a clarifying input, please message me.
yes, I would say just a demonstrated interest in terms of, I want to make sure that you know what, say, public health is, or accounting is, or social work is in your personal statement. In terms of like applications, like, are we tracking you in terms of that? This is like behind the curtain component. It's like after hours admissions talk.
Come on.
So what I'm doing right now, I am looking at student engagement, but I'm more looking at it in terms of research for me. I want to see what, for my own benefit and how I can be better admissions and a better recruiter to y'all, is what is more predictive of a student coming to our school. Is it because a student visited our campus? Is it because a student spoke to a current student, alumni, did a session, came to our open house? So I track student engagement, but that's only for my use to see how I can be better admissions counselor and give y'all what you need for. So if it means doing virtual sessions as opposed to like being present and coming to y'all at Vanderbilt, then that's something for me to change my route. But we don't do student engagement in terms of like, oh, they're really interested. They get like 5 points for their application.
Right.
Or it's nice for me to figure out my recruitment game, but also I like putting a face to a name. So if you give me a call and we have a really nice conversation, I'll remember you just because we had a conversation. But I'm not going to give you a merit scholarship because you called me on the phone.
Yeah, that's really good. Knowing that, yes, it's good to put a face to the name, but it doesn't necessarily have any way or measure to your application. And I guess I know we've got about 5 more minutes. There's just kind of, since we're in this 101 conversation, something that gets brought up a lot in my phone calls, like initial, like, hey, I think I might want to go to grad school. We eventually get to the why, but it's the jargon. Are there any kind of like common misunderstood words or ideas when it comes to the grad school application process, like things that are just kind of like known in that system that students should be aware of?
Off the top of my head, I think a lot of jargon that can get confusing is stuff revolving around scholarship and financial aid. And I think that's something, depending on your situation, really diving deep with a financial aid officer specifically about your specific circumstance and situation. And then in terms of scholarships, really outlining how students receive scholarships, whether that's need or merit-based scholarships, and really talking with your financial aid officers about that.
Yeah, I think that's great, Blake, because students, y'all might not know this, but like Blake and I can't advise on financial aid. It's actually like illegal for us to do so.
Yeah.
That's why you have financial aid offices, which they can't really advise you either, but they can talk to you more about your loans, what you've put on your FAFSA, things like that. But when you're asking me questions about like, should I take out these loans? I'm not the issue because I don't want to talk to you. I just really can't talk.
Yeah.
That. I think jargon, knowing what the FAFSA is and knowing that graduate school is a different ball game in terms of financial aid than undergrad. Your family income versus your own income, really do the research in that. Just not a jargon, but a point to make. I really like, if I read another essay, I think maybe this is why I got into personal statements so much about this. If I read another essay that says I want to go into public health because I want to change the world, like you should want to do that as a basic human being. Like everyone wants to make the world a better place. Just please avoid.
You'd be surprised, Brittany. You'd be surprised. I do value stacking. One of our activities is value stacking, and money is at the top sometimes.
I'm like, just be candid about that sometimes. maybe not go. Don't go with that quote from Gandhi unless like you really were impacted by that, because a lot of people go with that quote from Gandhi.
Just be your authentic self. I hear you.
So that's a little bit of pitfalls. That's why I really advocate for you talking about your own lived experience. It kind of just adds a voice to it. But exactly what Blake said, that financial aid component is a huge thing. Really talk to the financial aid advisors about that.
And I think to your point, Brittany, you naming that and telling students, like, I'm actually not allowed to talk to you about this, is very helpful, because like, it's from a coaching perspective. If a student asks me what classes to take, I'm not going to tell you because I'm not an academic advisor. I'm actually not allowed to tell you. So,
and something
mirroring that for them. Yeah.
Yes. And I think too, since we're along the lines of like things we can't talk to, I can't talk to y'all's parents. Y'all are above the age of 18 when you're applying to graduate school. So it's under FERPA laws. So if your parent calls me, I can't talk to them about your application. So you have to call me. Like, I swear I'm a nice person. Like, I'll really talk to you. You don't have to be nervous. But parents calling, I can't talk to them about your application status.
Right.
Yeah.
And just a few other things about jargon. When like you're doing research on whichever grad school you're looking at, just kind of being aware of what they mean by certain phrases, like you'll learn key skills in X area, or experiential learning, and like what does that actually mean, and be, asking somebody that's probably the admissions professional what they mean by that, and what specific examples of those things is going to be important to you actually knowing what you're getting yourself into.
That's a really great suggestion. know the words, literally. They could mean something different for each industry. So we're at 5:30. I just want to thank both of you, Brittany and Blake, and all the students who are here participating. Thank you for your questions. This has just been a really fun conversation and very insightful, very thoughtful. So I just want to take a second to thank you guys.
Well, thank you for having us.
Yes, thank you so much. It's so nice to talk to people that are not my animals.
I totally hear you. I hear you in that. Awesome. So I'm going to close the meeting. If you have any follow-up questions, students, feel free to reach out to me. I will be in touch with both of you, Blake and Brittany. Just thank you again so much for your time and for your insight.
Thanks, y'all. Stay safe.
Thank you.
Everybody be safe. Have a good rest of your night.